Chapter 1 Judgment from the Clouds. The heavens knew no night. In the Empyrean, the seat of the archangels, time was measured only by the intensity of the light radiating from the primordial source. Archangel Andrew had stood at the head of the host for thousands of years. His armor was forged not of metal, but of steadfast faith and sunbeams. His wings, a majestic span of brilliant white feathers, were a symbol of purity that had never tasted the dust of the earth. But now, he stood alone in the Hall of Echoes. Before him loomed 7 empty thrones, representing the will of creation. The voice that spoke did not emerge from a mouth but resonated within every atom of Andrew's being. Andrew, the guardians of the borders report that your flaming sword grew dim over the city of Lyrian. Why did you not end their cycle as was ordained? Andrew felt something foreign swelling in his chest, doubt. My lord, he began, his voice trembling like a lute string. I descended low, even to their rooftops. I intended to carry out the judgment. But then I saw an old man sharing his last bread with a stray dog. I saw a mother singing a lullaby to her child, even though she knew the end was near. If a spark of such love remains within them, how can we claim they are utterly corrupt? You were created to be an instrument, not a judge. The voice thundered, and the light in the hall turned red with anger. Your empathy is your downfall. Through it, you have allowed mortal weakness to stain your ethereal essence. You are no longer worthy to bear the light. In that moment, the celestial harmony turned into a discordant roar. 2 of his brothers, angels of justice, approached Andrew. Their faces were as if carved from marble, beautiful, yet utterly heartless. In their eyes, Andrew saw no pity, only a cold command. Without warning, they seized his shoulders. He felt the first touch of pain, a sensation angels were never meant to know. It was as if liquid lead had been poured into his veins. His white wings, which once carried him to the highest spheres, began to grow heavy. He watched in horror as the pure white feathers transformed. From the roots, a black rot spread, consuming the light. The feathers stiffened, matted together with blood and tar, until they turned into coal-black, broken stumps that clawed at his skin. Your pride shall be your burden, echoed through the hall like a death sentence. We cast you down into the world of mud and finality. You shall feel hunger, cold, and the weight of your deeds. Your redemption will not be found in prayers, but in the dust beneath your feet. The floor beneath Andrew vanished. The fall was infinite. He plummeted through spheres of fire, frost, and clouds. The atmosphere of the mortal world scorched his skin. Every meter of the descent tore away the remnants of his divinity. When he finally broke through the gray vault of clouds above the earth, he was nothing more than a falling shadow. He slammed into a muddy field on the edge of an unknown forest. The impact was crushing. Bones that were once light as air shattered. Andrew buried his face in the filthy earth and, for the first time in his eternal existence, did something human. He screamed. The pain was so intense it nearly drove him mad. He tasted the metallic tang of blood in his mouth, and felt the cold rain washing the soot from his ruined wings. He lay there, a broken archangel in the mud, listening to the silence of a world that was so cruel, and yet so real. The glow of his body faded. All that remained was a man in tattered, once golden armor, with black wings trailing in the mud like the shadow of his sin. Chapter 2 The Taste of Ash and Iron. The rain did not stop. It was not the clean, life-giving rain the seraphim sang of, but a cold, relentless veil that smelled of decaying leaves and wet stone. Andrew lay in a deep furrow that his body had carved into the waterlogged earth. Every breath felt like inhaling crushed glass. His lungs, once accustomed to pure ether, now had to struggle with the thick, humid air of mortals. He tried to move his arm. His fingers sank into slimy mud. The sensation shocked him. It was a tangible, unclean mass. He was no longer a being of thought and light. He was a prisoner in a shell of flesh and bone. He tried to move his arm. His fingers sank into slimy mud. The sensation shocked him. It was a tangible, unclean mass. He was no longer a being of thought and light. He was a prisoner in a shell of flesh and bone. I must get up, he whispered. His own voice sounded foreign to him. It was deep, rasping, and filled with a weakness he had never felt before. When he finally managed to stagger to his feet, the world spun. His once perfect sense of balance was gone. He looked around. He stood at the edge of a deep, black forest, its trees looking like the twisted fingers of giants clawing at the sky. In the distance, on the horizon, he saw a faint, flickering light. It was not an angelic glow, but the orange, restless shimmer of fire. He took a first step. And then a second. Every movement was accompanied by the metallic screech of his ruined armor, which was now more of a prison than a protection. The golden runes on his bracers had faded and turned black. After several dozen meters, he came upon a narrow, stony road. In the middle of the path stood a wooden cart, overturned on its side. Scattered around it were sacks of grain and broken barrels. And then he saw it. A body lay in the mud. A man, dressed in a simple linen robe, his throat slit so deeply that it was still steaming in the cold air. Andrew stopped. His first encounter with mortality was not heroic, but brutal. He leaned over the dead man, whose eyes were wide in a final flash of terror. The archangel who once commanded legions now felt his stomach turn. This was the reality he had spared in Lyrian, the reality of violence that humans face every day. "I am sorry," Andrew breathed, reaching out to place a hand on the man's forehead to give him a final blessing. At that moment, however, a shadow stepped out from the thick brush by the road. It was not just one. There were 5. Filthy men in tattered leather vests, with rusty swords and axes in their hands. Their eyes slid greedily over Andrew's armor, which even in the rain shimmered dimly with the remnants of celestial beauty. "Look at that," laughed one of them, a brute with a scar across his face. "Looks like more than just a bit of rain fell from the sky. That gold on his shoulders will feed us all winter." Andrew straightened up. Even in the ruins of his power, he looked imposing. The black stumps of his wings quivered slightly. "Go away, mortals," he said with the authority that remained in his blood. "This ground is already stained with the blood of an innocent. Do not add your own to it." The raiders looked at each other, and then burst into coarse laughter. "He's giving us orders! Look at those black rags on his back. He's just some cursed crow, nothing more." The leader of the bandits took a step forward and raised a heavy axe. Andrew felt the old fire trying to ignite within him, but instead of a flame, he felt only cold ash. He had to defend himself for the first time as a human, knowing that if he failed, his journey would end before it had even truly begun. Chapter 3: The Weight of Mortal Flesh. Andrew tried to summon his flaming sword. It was a motion he had performed for millennia, simply clenching his right hand and letting the ether crystallize into a blade of pure light. But this time, nothing happened. His fingers closed on empty air. Only the muscles in his forearm tightened convulsively. Instead of the searing heat of the heavens, he felt only a stabbing pain in his shoulder, where the bones had still not realigned after the fall. "Where is your magic crow?" the scarred brute mocked, taking another step forward. The mud beneath his boots squelched like a hungry mouth. The bandit leader struck first. The axe swung in a wide, clumsy arc. In Empyreum, Andrew would have seen the movement before it even began. Time used to flow differently for him. Now, however, his reflexes were trapped in a slow, heavy body. He dodged, but only a fraction of a second later than necessary. The axe blade did not cleave his chest, but it slammed into his left pauldron. The blow rattled him. The sound of metal striking metal resonated all the way to his teeth. Andrew staggered. The shock of the impact knocked the wind out of him, and for the first time, he felt the meaning of physical exhaustion. His heart, that new, frantic drum in his chest, was pounding so hard it throbbed in his temples. "He's still standing!" shouted another bandit, a gaunt man with a dagger, as he lunged from the side. Andrew instinctively lashed out with his left wing. It wasn't a graceful movement, but a desperate maneuver. The heavy, black mass of broken feathers and stiffened tar struck the attacker in the face. The man shrieked as the sharp tips of the feathers shredded his skin, and he was sent sprawling. But the price was high. The movement of the wing triggered such agony in Andrew's back that his vision went dark for a moment. The muscles that held the wings to his spine were not built to carry such weight without the support of divine power. He fell to one knee. Rain ran into his eyes, stinging like salt. "Look at him, he bleeds like a pig!" The brute laughed and spat on the ground. "The gold on him is nice, but look at that skin! Pale as a nobleman's. He's never held anything heavier than a cup of wine in his life." The bandits began to close the circle. Andrew felt his strength failing. His body was like a machine that had run out of fuel. Every muscle trembled with fatigue, the cold was seeping under his ruined armor, and the dampness chilled him to the bone. He felt humiliated. He, who had once driven back the shadows at the edge of the universe, could not now defeat 5 filthy mortals. "Father!" he whispered to the dark sky, but no answer came from above. Only thunder, rolling lazily over the mountains. The bandit leader raised his axe for the final blow. "Let's end this. I want those black wings of his as a trophy over my hearth. They'll look real nice next to the deer antlers." Andrew tried to stand, but his foot slipped in a pool of the dead merchant's blood. At the very moment the axe began to descend, he realized the terrifying truth of his redemption. In this world, he was not protected by his holiness. He could die. He could truly, definitively cease to exist in the mud by the road, forgotten and useless. That thought awakened something new within him. It was not the anger of an angel, but the survival instinct of a creature that wants to live. As the axe fell, Andrew did not attempt an elegant escape. He threw his entire weight forward, directly under the attacker's strike. His shoulder slammed into the bandit's stomach. The weight of his ruined wings, which had been a burden until now, gave him momentum this time. Both of them crashed into the mud. Andrew felt the coarse fabric of the bandit's vest under his hands, and the stench of his unwashed body. It was disgusting and far too close. A struggle for bare life began, a fight where there were no rituals, only fingernails, teeth, and blunt strikes to the face. While Andrew grappled in the mire with the leader, the other bandits hesitated for a moment, surprised by the sudden ferocity of their victim. At that moment, a whistle echoed from the forest. Short, sharp, and commanding. Chapter 4: A Shadow Among the Trees. The second when the axe was meant to fall stretched into infinity. Andrew lay in the mud, pressed against the brute's chest, feeling a foreign, mortal life pulsing beneath his fingers. The other raiders were already raising their weapons to finish the job when a sound that did not belong to the rainy night pierced the air. Thwip. The short, dry whistle was followed by a heavy thud. One of the bandits, the one with the dagger, suddenly stopped screaming. He looked down at his chest, where a long arrow with gray fletching had pierced his muddy vest. The man only let out a rasping wheeze and fell face first into a puddle. "What the hell?" the leader managed to bark before a figure emerged from the dense undergrowth at the edge of the road. "What the hell?" the leader managed to bark before a figure emerged from the dense undergrowth at the edge of the road. The figure was not tall, but moved with a lightness that Andrew, in his new, heavy body, could only envy. They were shrouded in a cloak the color of wet bark, which made them almost invisible in the gloom. The figure did not speak. With cold precision, they released a second arrow. It struck another raider in the thigh. The man collapsed to the ground, howling in terror. "Kill her! Kill that rat!" the bandit leader roared, trying to shake Andrew off him. Andrew, however, seized the moment of surprise. Though his muscles burned with fatigue, he braced himself and struck the brute's nose with his forehead using all his might. The crunch of bone was disgustingly loud. The bandit wailed and momentarily loosened his grip. At that moment, the cloaked figure ran directly among them. In their hands was no sword, but 2 short, curved blades that shimmered only dimly in the distant light of the raiders' fire. The figure moved like a dance of shadows, dodge, slash, pirouette. Within seconds, the remaining 2 capable bandits lay in the mud, clutching bleeding wounds. Silence returned to the road, interrupted only by Andrew's heavy breathing and the drumming of rain against the leaves. The cloaked figure stopped and slowly approached Andrew. She threw back her hood. It was a girl, perhaps slightly older than those Andrew had seen in Lyrian. She had short-cropped dark hair and a deep scar on her face that pulled the corner of her mouth into a permanent bitter smirk. Her eyes, however, were what struck Andrew most. There was no fear in them, but a deep, weary wisdom of someone who had already seen too many ends of the world. "Are you finished with your mud bath, Celestial?" She spoke coldly. Her voice was as sharp as her blades. Andrew looked at her, still on his knees. "Who are you?" he wheezed, feeling blood trickle from the corner of his mouth. "Someone who doesn't like a mess being made on her doorstep," she replied, sheathing her blades at her waist. Then she walked over to him, and, without the slightest hint of reverence, grabbed him by his ruined pauldron. "Get up! If you stay here, you'll be nothing but a frozen carcass by morning. And believe me, your feathers stink all the way to my camp." Andrew tried to stand, but his legs would not obey. The weight of his black wings pulled him relentlessly back to the ground. The girl sighed, shook her head, and slipped her arm under his shoulder. "Come on, hero. Lean on me. My name is Alara. And if you want to survive this night, you're going to have to forget you were ever anything more than a piece of meat with an unusual decoration on your back." Andrew leaned on her. Her body was small but firm as a rock. For the first time in his life, he felt a human touch that was not an attack, but help. It was warming and, at the same time, immensely humiliating. An archangel, led by a wounded mortal through the dark forest. "Why are you helping me?" he breathed as they dragged themselves away from the road strewn with dead bodies. Alara looked at him briefly, and her smirk deepened. "Because you look like someone who owes the world a very big apology. And I want to be there when you start paying it back." Chapter 5: Shadows Beneath the Moon. Alara's hideout was no palace. It was an old, partially collapsed watchtower, swallowed by the massive root system of a giant oak. Inside, it smelled of dried herbs, smoke, and old wood. A small fire pit in the center of the room provided just enough light to dispel the thickest shadows, but not enough to attract unwanted attention from the outside. Andrew sat on a heap of dry straw. Without warning, Alara pressed a rag soaked in a pungent decoction against the wound in his side. The pain was sharp and human. Andrew gritted his teeth so hard his jaw snapped. "Don't fight it," Alara growled without looking up. "Your body isn't made of ether anymore. Now you're just skin, muscle, and blood. If the rot gets into that wound, you'll die before you can say amen." "Why did you speak of a debt?" Andrew asked once the pain had receded slightly. "How do you know what I am?" Alara finally straightened up and set aside the blood-stained rag. In the firelight, she looked older than she had on the road. "You're not the first to fall, Celestial. But you're the first in 100 years. Legends of the fallen are passed down in my family. They say when a star falls into the mud, it brings either hope or final ruin. And looking at what's happening in the valley, we're going to need both." She walked to a narrow arrow slit and motioned for him to stand. Andrew rose with difficulty. Every movement of his black, broken wings was accompanied by a dull throbbing in his spine. He stepped toward her and looked out. In the distance, deep in the valley below them, lay a city. It was not, however, shrouded in a peaceful night. A thick, unnaturally black smoke hovered over its walls, hanging motionless in the air despite the rain. Lights flickered between the houses, but they were not the lights of lanterns. It was a violet, pulsing glow that resembled a festering wound in reality. "That is Oakhaven," Alara whispered, fear touching her voice for the first time. "Or what's left of it. 3 months ago, something woke up there. We call it the Void. It's not an army, it's not a disease. It's a hunger. People there simply cease to be people. They become hollow shells serving something that came from the depths of the earth." Andrew watched the violet flashes. He felt something familiar in them. It was an echo of the same power he had felt in Empyreum, but turned inside out. Pure order twisted into absolute tyranny. "That's why those bandits were so desperate," Alara continued. "They're running from it. Everyone is running. That thing in Oakhaven devours souls and memories. And worst of all, it's spreading. Every night the shadows grow a little longer. The forests are dying. The animals are going mad. She turned to him, her eyes burning with anger. You angels were supposed to protect us. You watched us from your golden thrones while hell opened up beneath us. And now that you're one of us, look at the devastation. That is the threat, Andrew. If it isn't stopped in Oakhaven, there will be nothing left for you to redeem. Andrew felt a weight heavier than his wings. He realized that while his refusal to destroy Lyrian might have been right, his indifference toward the rest of the world during his centuries of service was a sin he now had to repay. I know what it is, he said quietly. It is the Light Eater. An ancient entity my brothers imprisoned in the roots of the world long ago. We thought the prison would last forever. Forever ends pretty quickly down here, Elara snapped. We leave tomorrow morning. I need to reach the southern pass and warn the other settlements. You're coming with me. Not because I want you to, but because with those wings, the first Void sentry would smell you a mile away. I have to teach you how to hide, how to fight like a rat, and not like a god. Andrew nodded. He looked at his hands, dirty, with scraped knuckles and trembling from the cold. The path to redemption would no longer lead through heavenly gates, but through the heart of the darkness consuming this world. Teach me, he said firmly. Teach me how to be human,